And welcome to this episode of the podcast. We are sitting down with Chris Korfis and Dan Fichter, two men that the internet may call experts in speed, strength, power. And we are going to put them to the test today, and we are going to find that out. With Chris and Dan today, we are going to be discussing what they feel are some of the basic foundations for, let's say, track, let's say speed, let's say the weight room, and the field as it might pertain to a coach's education. Gentlemen, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having us, Chris. You know, the definition of expert is someone who gets something right 3 times. So I guess in the last 35 years, I got something right 3 times.
Well, and I'm close, I think. I think I'm at least going for 3. I don't know if I'm there yet.
Perfect.
So that'll be good.
And I'll say I threw that term out after a quick chat GPT and Grok of you two gentlemen. So somewhere out there, AI is really boosting you two up. So that's pretty exciting.
It's nice to be recognized by something that doesn't really exist.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm always going for, where I fall in the AI or the Google.
The story of my life. I
Yeah.
don't really exist. Yeah.
So you two are coaches, and the age-old question is, what's your big why? Always start with why, as that one guy said in his book. So I kind of want to start things out here of why do you guys coach? Tony Holler described coaching at a conference once as you're rolling the ball up the hill, and you're either going to get to the top and it rolls back on top of you, or it's going to go over the other side. But year after year, you're rolling that ball up the hill. Why? What are you doing it for year after year? Dan, we'll start with you.
So mine was when I was training as an athlete, trying to get better, I realized that there was so much more than I actually learned when I was competing, right? So I was excited about the aspect of chasing all of the answers to speed and strength. And that kind of got me into what am I really good at? And I was really good at playing ball and playing sports. So then I'm like, okay, let me major in phys ed so I can go out and teach kids how to move. And then it became a competition. Like, how can I teach people how to move at an elite level? And then it just kind of steamrolls from there.
Awesome. Yeah, it almost seems like every coach has that story of they discovered something on their own and they want to keep pursuing it because they wish they had it. Is that similar for you, Chris, or do you have a different kind of big why in your life?
I think it's kind of like the unsolvable question. Like, how can you make someone a much better athlete? You know, why can't we make everyone sub 10, right?
Mm-hmm.
So where in there, what strings can I pull on in the Gordian knot to try to get someone to go faster? And the bad part is that when you think you got it, you realize you don't have it, and you're actually further away than what you originally thought.
Do you think that's a year-to-year thing? It's just this group of athletes, it's not going to work for them? Do you think that Bigfoot is out there that you could find, but you're only going to have them for a brief moment with that group of kids?
Well, I'm trying to make sure there's lots of Bigfoots, I guess. I want to replicate it every year. And I think that's the challenge is, okay, you got a great year. What's going to happen next year? Can you rebuild? Can you reload? Whatever coaching terms you want to use. Can you replicate over and over again excellence? And I think whether you're coaching football or track or just working with an athlete, I think that's ultimately what we're looking for is, you know, excellence is the replication of something really good.
So across your career, Chris, it kind of seems like I'm not going to say bounce, but 5 years maybe out of school, and then you kind of go to the next one, challenging yourself, like when you went to Montini because they didn't have a weight room, things like that. Dan, how long have you been at Irondequoit?
Forever.
Forever is a mighty long time, but I'm here to tell you, there's something else. Just haven't found it yet. I've been at Irondequoit High School, where I went to high school my entire life. Did my student teaching with one of my assistant coaches, who's my mentor, who was on my football staff. So I actually taught at a school called Greece Olympia in my student teaching, but it was with the guy that I hired back as my first coach that I hired when I got the job at Irondequoit. So I've seen track kids come through all different kinds for 25 years. Football kids come through all different kinds, and I've seen the ebbs and flows of it. And I absolutely love the competition. I'd be lying if I told you I don't like the competitive part of coaching and teaching, because getting a kid to master a movement when they had no idea how to do it to start, it's a pretty fantastic feeling. So I have to have that match lit all the time. And that's why it'll be hard for me to step away from coaching, because I'm very competitive.
No, I hear that. It's hard. It's like you just have all those pit bulls on a leash, right? And you get to control it and dictate it. So one of the reasons I asked that question, Dan, was kind of what Chris was saying there of year after year trying to, I'm going to word it as establish and find this system. Since you've been at your school for so long, do you influence the training of middle schoolers? Do you have any influence over the phys ed day to day there, so that when they are your juniors and seniors, they've been in your system for multiple years?
Yeah. So I'm so old. When I started teaching there is when everybody would static stretch in PE class. I was the guy that put us onto dynamic mobility and actually started moving while we were stretching. And it was revolutionary in phys ed class. Let's get up and move. Well, that's novel. Now it's like, if you're not moving, what are you doing? Right. So and that's why the last couple of presentations I've been talking about, we're talking about connecting dots, because it circles back. So as you try to find these landmarks in training that go across the board for everybody, movement is one of them. And it's not always the strongest kid, and it's not always the weakest kid. It's not always the most coordinated kid who's the fastest kid, but there's a combination in there of all of it. And it's teasing that out. That's the challenge. And that's why I get up at 4:30 every morning and research, because I feel like somebody's chasing me.
I like that. So this is kind of the classic age-old question, but it'll kind of springboard us into what I want. What's one thing that you guys are doing now? Let's just call it a principle, a technique, an exercise that you wish you had known when you were a younger coach just starting out? I know that's super broad in general, but you're doing this and you look back like, where was this 15, 20 years ago?
Jumping jacks, by far.
All right. And then are you going arms in front for the neurological
Yeah,
gait
that's right.
component
Sometimes you cross them over, and then you can go peekaboo with it too.
That's
Kids
smart.
love it when you go peekaboo.
Yeah, and in unison, correct?
In unison.
Yeah.
In unison.
Everyone counting as they clap at the top.
I don't know about exercises like that would, because they cycle through. Like, you go away from doing an exercise, then you come back like, man, why did I go away from doing this? And really, it's very personalized. I don't think there's a exercise that covers all, that it's going to raise the tide for all the boats, or whatever that saying is. I think it's your ability to use your tools the best. Like, yeah, I wish I could have used this, coached up a primetime run better than I have before, or something like that. So I think it's not so much of something that you go back, or I wish I would have had this. It's mastering the toolkit that you have is something that I think is more important than the accumulation of how many exercises can I learn. You know, I think with Instagram or social media or any of those things, anyone can accumulate 50,000 crazy exercises. But really, your masters in different things are someone who's great with 5 or 6 different things.
Absolutely. How many, you're a Chicago guy, how many actual moves did Michael Jordan have, right? But he was a master at all of them.
Yeah.
So Dan, Chris kind of addressed exercises there. I'm going to shift the question for you. Is there I'm going to call it principle, such as 2 weeks before the biggest game of the year, 2 weeks before the biggest track meet of the year, we're going to taper this way? Like, is there a more kind of like 50,000 foot view thing you do now? Post-game recovery techniques, intermission halftime techniques, anything like that you could look back on and go like, oh, this would have really helped move the needle all those years ago?
I think it's the mindset of understanding that the brain controls all, right? So I remember 25 years ago, maybe, Jay Schroeder said to me, everybody's fast and everybody's strong. They just can't display it. And I think Chris alluded to that earlier, or one of you guys alluded to it earlier today. So for me, it's about looking at somebody and say, what is their limitations? Why can they not display what I want them to display? And sometimes that comes out in a competitive atmosphere. Sometimes it comes out in a brain-driven exercise. Sometimes it comes into strengthening your hamstrings. Just everybody's going to be a little bit different, but there are some global things that have really surfaced in the last I don't know, 10 years, and you have to address the brain. You have to.
Now, Dan, I've heard you say at a presentation before, hey guys, I do normal stuff,
Mhm.
right? But I'm not going to stand up here at a conference and give you the normal, the boring, this is our 5x5 program or whatever. So I've heard both of you speak enough to know at a conference, you're not going to kind of give the normal, the boring. But do you feel that if a first time or younger coach comes to hear you guys speak, they may miss a lot because they don't have that base and they don't have that foundation in the classic textbooks or the classic coaches? Yeah, thoughts there, and we'll start with you, Chris.
I think when people come hear me speak, I go so fast and I throw so much that I think, yeah, some people can get lost. I do basic stuff, but like you said, you can't show up at a clinic that people have paid for and say, we're doing this. Something really basic, but I do complicated stuff as well. And I think that's really knowing, again, like I said before, knowing when to apply something basic and knowing when to apply something very complicated. You have to look at what the problem is and use your knowledge, your wisdom, your experience to try to use what's best for that scenario. And that could change on a daily basis with an athlete.
Now, to dig into that a little bit more, how did you figure that out? Do you feel like there were certain coaches you got exposed to years ago or certain books you got exposed to years ago? Or is it all just, I tried something, it went well, I tried something, it failed?
I think it was really more my unlearning that, early on, you have macrocycles, mesocycles, microcycles, and you've got your volume all planned out and you've got your percentages perfect all the time. And then you realize, well, wait a minute, something happened to this kid. There's no way they can keep up with that. So it's really when you've seen what was written down for someone and you're trying to follow what someone else did, you've realized, what they were doing in Bulgaria in the 1980s or 1970s with all kinds of drugs, including various fish tranquilizers and stuff like that. That's not so great for my 16-year-old here. I think Louis Simmons is, the selection of exercises that he used, I think that was a pretty good eye-opener but then once you get it, you know what to do. It's the art of coaching. It's, when to use this tool or that tool or when to do this. And it may not be what you wrote down in paper. I think that's what frustrates people is I don't write anything down. I don't know what I'm going to do at a practice until I go in and I ask my kids that day, hey, how are you guys doing? What do you feel like doing? What hurts? What doesn't hurt? What do you want? Where are we at? Because that could change daily too. And this year we had a kid die in a car accident, not on my team, but a kid at the high school. And I had to completely change everything because everyone was wiped out. Nobody wanted to train. I said, all right, then let's go home. Go take care of yourselves.
It's like this weekend, as Cal was talking about the art versus the science. Typically, at least I haven't found it in my textbooks, what to do when there's a tragedy on the team.
Yeah.
We had a guy break his neck, ambulance, helicopter, surgery that night type of deal. And what do you say in the locker room as you kind of prepare your team? So as Chris is saying that, Dan, and speaking there with all of his years of wisdom, do you still feel, though, that there are basic, universal speed and strength principles that kind of underlie all of this? So now he has that intuition. He could show up at his practice and make the call then and there. But do you think that is all based on a pillar or a foundation of like this, and this?
So let's go to this. So very few movements in the weight room transfer. I think we can all agree on that, right? There's not any guarantees that they're going to transfer. So I think what you do is you make a running list of what you think's going to work and what you think's not going to work. So I understand that some kids need to get stronger to get faster. That's a reality. So I'm not willing to throw every strength training modality out because strength doesn't play a role in the fastest guys in the world. However, I do have to understand over the years that there are unintended consequences of lifting weights. When there's unintended consequences, you have to address them and know the answers to that. So I think when DB Hammer came out with his book and he really talked about all the different, like, let's just take the squat. He would always say, well, how are you squatting? Are you doing oscillating? Are you doing reactives? Are you doing isometrics? Are you doing rapidly firing isometric. I mean, how are you squatting? Because that makes a difference. Because if you're squatting like everybody else, it ain't going to work. Then we talk about splitting your feet in the weight room just a little bit to make a completely brain-friendly exercise to something that normally that bilateral movement shuts you off. So it's these little nuances of turning older stuff that has been around for a while that does have merit, but it's just how it got there. So if it got there 40% of the people or 30% of the people, why did it not work for the other 60%? And I think that's where your answers are. So you find out where things fail. And we've been around for so long, you know what doesn't work, or when it breaks, what you need to add to it. So like isometrics, like everybody talks about these overcoming isometrics. I think yielding isometrics are the way to go to share the stress. These extreme slow movements, if you're going to be putting that into your routines. So it's stuff like that.
You know, kind of talking on the isometric thing, I think because people that are older that have been coaching so long, they get bored and they're looking for something else. And I think that's why we should shift. You know, the impetus is going to be about the same. I mean, it's similar. I think boredom creeps into coaching and you get tired of doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, especially if you're working out yourself. And you go, oh man, I was really sore after I did this. Maybe I'm going to try it with my kids. You know, I think people do that. Go ahead, Dan. I cut you off. Sorry.
Well, and I've relearned a bunch of stuff through coaching football later on. I was a defensive coach most of my career. Now I'm an offensive coach. So I had to go out and research, okay, what are we going to do real quick to make me understand offense at a different level that I can actually call a game and be successful at it. And you know what happened? It's really funny. We run 2 offensive plays. We run wide zone and we run toss. We have no other in polecat because of Chris. We have no other offensive plays. Now, if you look at wide zone, it looks different every time we run it. Different formations, different this, different that, but we're still hitting the same point. We're still hitting the same aiming point, the same technique, the same double teams. And that says a lot for motor learning because now they know what they're doing. They know what the expectation is. And like we were talking about at the clinic, we just added a different stimulus like auditory. All of a sudden, the entire world changes because of your brain, not because of the exercise. We're doing the same damn things. So I like it like when Chris talks about the muscles he was talking about at the conference. And then all of a sudden we add the auditory to it. It's like taking the highlight marker and going right over the top of that exercise and going, now it's even better.
And the conference you're alluding to is the Revolutions in Speed 2 conference, right?
Yeah, the Sweatbox in Charleston, South Carolina.
Yeah, we were awake. We were awake for that one.
I was one more speaking session away from my ideal body weight because I was sweating off.
Yeah, there you go. That's the South. That's what the Southern humidity will do to you
without air conditioning.
Yeah, just a little bit. But for anyone listening, if they're wondering what conference they're alluding to, Chris, Dan, Cal Dietz, and a few other guys were just speaking at a conference down in South Carolina. And if you give that a Google, I'm sure you could find some recordings or thoughts and ideas from that. You guys have mentioned a couple coaches during this: Jay Schroeder, DB Hammer, Louis Simmons. I've heard you both speak about going to Westside, of interacting with Louis Simmons. So I'd love for you guys to kind of just share your Louis Simmons stories because we all love him. So Chris, you were trying to pursue speed and you thought, hey, this guy's talking about bands and chains.
Well, I think
what did you find there?
You know, that's back when I thought a better squat's going to get you a better sprint and the stronger is going to get you faster and all that. And
you were a meathead.
I was a meathead. I was. I had chains, I had bands, I had reverse hyper, I had glute ham, I had a belt squat. So I went down there and, you know, he's very welcoming and a great teacher. And it was a 3-day affair and you follow him around, you go to the gym, you hang out at the gym and you see huge people move a lot of weight and he teaches you along the way and you walk out with a Westside Barbell book that's got all of his writings in it. And he was always more than, you know, helpful in answering questions if you called him or you sent him mail. And then I went back a couple of times after that just to check in and to learn. And, you learn a lot from someone like that, his passion for research, using science to get better answers, and creating. He created a lot of stuff and applied it pretty well. Again, his sport. And eventually he told me, what we're doing here is my sport. This isn't your sport. You need to go somewhere else because all the answers aren't here for you. And that's kind of where I moved on.
We'll get to Dan there in a second with his Louis story, but you kind of just sparked my thought here, Chris. You went to Westside, you bought all the equipment, maybe even had a belt squat or something. And I know that you may buy and then you may get rid of, then you may go, oh shoot, I wish I still had that. So after this weekend of seeing the various ways that Cal is using a reverse hyper, various ways that he's torturing his son on a glute ham raise, are there pieces of equipment from the past that you're like, I wish I still held on to that one?
Belt squat's pretty good. Louis Simmons belt squat's pretty good. When I left Hinsdale Central, the coach that kind of forced me out chopped it up. It was an incredibly built belt squat, and because he hated me so much, he chopped up all the Westside barbell stuff.
Should have
nice
called
guy.
a power lifter. Let him know.
I know.
They're defacing you.
Mm-hmm.
The belt squat was great. The inertial training machine that I talked about this weekend, that's a great piece of equipment that's not made anymore. I wouldn't even know how to manufacture something like that because it's so unique. I don't even know if he's still alive, actually. But yeah, he made great equipment. He had a good fabricator that put together really good ideas, and other people do too. There is a guy down in Central Illinois, fabricated really good stuff. He died, unfortunately, a couple of years ago. But yeah, they become your tools. Like now I'm completely spoiled with the Synchro and 1080 Sprint, and it's hard to see how you go away from that. Like we lost power last night and people came over to train. It's like, oh shit, I don't have the Synchro. I don't have the Sprint. What am I going to do? How am I going to kill an hour?
Yeah. Yeah, it's once you have a piece of technology or equipment like any of the 1080 Motion products, and then the power goes out or the cord snaps, you have to retie it, you realize how great it is, how effective it is, and how much you really rely on it. Yeah, no, I'm definitely been there. All right, so Dan, over to you now. Your kind of Louis Simmons story and anything that you really kept and held on to since meeting him and first interacting with him.
I didn't have the visits that Chris had when I was younger. I might have read some books and seen some videotapes, old VHS tapes, but never.
I had all of his videotapes, and I got Powerlifter USA every month. That's how I found him. He had an advertisement in the classifieds in the back, and it was like a 3-line thing. Call this number, and I called, and I'm like, oh my God, I talked to Louis Simmons.
Yeah.
But we still, when Chris and I got together, a few years back, I don't know how long ago now, but, we talked about that. I wasn't really an expert in the Westside methods or the conjugate system, but I knew about it and read about it and talked about it with Mel Siff a little bit. But for me, how I met Louis Simmons is my phone rings one day at my gym, and I answer the phone and I'm like, hello, this is Dan. And he's like, hey, Dan, this is Louis. Louis who? Louis Simmons. So then the first person I thought of was the KISS guy, right? But that's Gene Simmons, right? I couldn't place it because he wasn't in my training world. So then when he said Louis Simmons, I thought he was bullshitting me. So I hung up. He called back. I answered the phone again. I thought it was my buddy busting my chops. But then I was thinking, if I didn't know Louis Simmons, how the hell would one of my buddies know that? They wouldn't, unless it was Chris, right? So I start talking to him, and he's like, I hear you got some pretty good ideas in rehab. And I was like, no, you got me mixed up with somebody else. I'm a speed and strength guy, not a rehab guy. But he's like, no, you're doing some great things with the ARP machine. We had some electric stim technology, and he came out to see me. And that's the best story, because when I told that story at TFC in front of JL, I almost got my face ripped off, because he said, there's no way that guy's going to your gym. And he was probably right. After I've heard all these stories in the last few years, he would have never came, but he did. He came out, invited me out to his place, actually stayed at his house to watch a UFC fight. And I got pretty close with him. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't do much of what he does. And I don't think I ever really have. So when he came in, one of the things he said to me is, because you helped me, I'm going to give you a belt squat. So that's how I got my belt squat. He gave it to me. So it was awesome. Right. So as he's in the gym, he said to me, and I was just talking to this father today. He was in the gym and he said, I'll help you. I'll teach you how to pull sleds. Do you pull sleds? I'm like, yeah, we pull sleds. He's like, all right, let's go outside. Give me your best guy and we'll pull sleds. And I've told this story 100,000 times. The kid starts pulling the sled. Louis goes, you're doing it wrong. Let me show you. He puts on the thing. He starts pulling it and I'm videotaping him. And he's walking same arm, same leg. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. How can you do that? He goes, no, you don't know what you're talking about. This is the way you do it. I'm like, Louis, that's not the way you do it. That didn't go well. But when he came back inside, I showed him the video and he's like, I'll be damned. I'm like, yeah. So that whole thing was kind of like the birth of him in powerlifting, understanding the power of neurology. And again, I gave him a couple simple drills to do. He called me 2 weeks later at Westside and he's like, you're not going to believe this. I put 20 pounds on my bench press. And I'm like, quiet. I'm like, oh, who cares? What? All you did was a neurological exercise to fix your cross crawl issue. Nothing to do with your bench press. You move cleaner now. That's all. He didn't understand that. And that's okay, but it helped him in his sport. So that's my story. And he's a fantastic human. I met his wife. She's awesome.
Met his dogs.
Yeah.
He had good dogs.
What did he have? Bulldogs or pit bulls?
He had started with a pit bull, then went American Bulldog.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it's not a great story, but it's a story where I didn't think I'd ever cross paths with him. Let's put it like that. So, yeah.
I mean, it gives you credibility of, I put 20 pounds on a seasoned powerlifter's bench press by fixing his cross crawl pattern. That's pretty impressive, right?
Yeah.
And
it's all about the titles.
Yeah, exactly. And I keep bringing up these popular coaches that if you Google strength conditioning, they're going to keep coming up. And I just want people to hear kind of your guys' experiences of, I went down that rabbit hole and here's what I thought and here's how I kind of moved on. But Dan, you just recently mentioned Mel Siff, and you mentioned at a lot of conferences that you went out to a Mel Siff camp, you swam in his pool and you're like, hey, I want to learn about speed. And then he said, all right, go over to that bookshelf, pick out a book, and it's an aerobic training book. Yeah. And did he say to you, you need to learn what you don't want to learn so then you know why you don't do it, that sort of thing? And then, Dan, do you feel that it's important to kind of learn the opposite quality that you want to develop so you know not to overdevelop it, or just kind of give thoughts there?
I'll tell you what I took out of that. And he put me in his basement because at that time I was the only person there. So he put me in his basement. I'm like, man, this is a library. I mean, it was like a full room of wall-to-wall books. So I go over, I start pulling out books and looking, and he said, what are you reading? I'm like, explosive this, anaerobic this. And he's like, do you do any research in aerobic training? I'm like, nah. And I was young at the time, maybe 24, 25 years old. I'm like, no, that's not where it's at, Mel. That's not where it's at. And he's looking at me, he's laughing. He's like, so you think you know all about the aerobic system? No, I don't. And he's like, well, don't you think you ought to do that before you go and tell somebody not to do it? Yeah, that's a good point. So I tell you what I took out of that more than anything else is he told me, if you're ever arguing, and this didn't work for me, by the way, if you're ever arguing with your wife and you want to get along, in the middle of the argument, switch what you're arguing for. Like you argue for her and she'll argue for you. Right? He goes, and see where that gets you. Well, it didn't work for me, but it certainly made me think, that makes sense. So what it's helped me do in the past is sit in a lecture, listen to someone who has a different philosophical idea than I do, and still learn and still draw out one or two things that I can connect the dot back to my philosophy.